While the possession of an Agrippa meant unmitigated misery for a layman and heavy cares even for a priest, many magical writings were treasured allies in the struggle of good against evil. Their words recorded the formulas to control unruly forces, and the letters themselves pulsed with virtuous energy. Icelandic bards told of a benevolent wizard named Agrippa, who owned such a magical tome and used it to help his countrymen when dark powers threatened them. One of his clients was a young farmer from the Vestmanna Islands off the mainland's southern coast. 7 weeks after their wedding, the farmer's bride had risen early one morning and gone out as usual to fetch the firewood. She never returned. The farmer searched everywhere but could discover no sign of her. Picturing her drowned beneath the cold sea that beat upon the island from every side, he fell into such a black slough that his friends began to fear for his life. They advised him to sustain hope a little longer and urged him to consult Agrippa. When the farmer arrived at the seer's house on the mainland, he found that he was as expected. The wise men's first words were an inquiry about the missing bride. The seer promised to put his skills at the wretched husband's disposal. For 3 days, Agrippa studied his book but made no move, and then on the morning of foul weather, he led the farmer on horseback to a pile of great rocks on a lonely hillside. He leaned the book against the largest of the ancient stones, and although the storm billowed about them, the volume remained dry and unspotted. The page leaves never stirred. Agrippa stared intently at the book as if sucking sustenance from its pages. Then he walked around the rock, moving, in the time-honored manner of the sorcerer, anti-clockwise, uttering a spell. As the magician murmured, figures emerged from the living rock and crowded together in the grass. "These," said Agrippa, "were mortals that had been spirited to the other world by trolls." He bade the farmer look carefully to see whether his wife was one of them. The farmer walked through the silent figures, scanning their impassive faces. His bride was not there. The wizard gravely thanked the revenants for answering his call, and they vanished into the rock. Again Agrippa turned to his book, found a new place in it, and then paced his way around the rock, murmuring again. A different group of people drifted from the rock, but the farmer's wife was not among them either. Agrippa tried once more failed. The seer, pale and weary, confessed that he had called every troll in Iceland, and now knew nowhere to turn. But suddenly his eyes lit up. Agrippa recalled one pair of trolls who had not been named in his spells. He drew from his robe a single page of antique writing. Unfolding the parchment, he laid it upon the open book and softly read out a spell. Out of the rock came a pair of hideous creatures carrying a glass cage. Within it was the figure of a woman only inches high. The farmer cried out. The tiny creature was his wife. With words of power, Agrippa rebuked the trolls and drove them back to their own dark world. As they vanished, the glass box shattered on the ground, and Agrippa lifted away the shards to release the prisoner. At first she remained unnaturally small, as if seen from a great height. Agrippa read a passage from his book. She grew to her proper size and collapsed into her husband's arms. For safety's sake, the wise man journeyed with the couple back to their own island. Trolls robbed of their prizes could be vengeful. He stayed for 3 additional days, lying each night with his head pillowed on his book at the door of the house, listening to the sounds outside. What he heard was neither the pounding of the waves nor the calling of the seabirds, but the sibilant whispers of an inhuman hate. The trolls, unwilling to accept defeat, had come back to claim their slave. They lurked outside the door of the house, peering through the windows with eyes red and malevolent, muttering threats and curses through the chinks in the wall. But Agrippa drew strength from the book that was his pillow. He rose up, and from his parted lips there issued a spell so terrible that it turned the night sky white and sent the trollish kidnappers squealing back to the netherworld. Hearing this tale, the women on Iceland's farms walked warily, knowing that somewhere on the lonely shore or at the foot of a black volcano, a pair of disgruntled trolls were on the hunt for a new slave. Agrippa's book imparted much of its magic directly, through physical contact, just as we saw with the spells of the Book of Thoth entered Agrippa, and the beer he gulped. Many other writings possessed such concrete powers. Magical inscriptions carved on stone in ancient Egypt sometimes incorporated channels to correct water that was poured over the text, to absorb its virtues, and it could be brewed into efficacious potions. Chinese talismans of ivory and jade inscribed with ideograms of happiness, long life, peace, or prosperity were worn to confirm their meanings to the possessors. In a similar vein, when a patient consulted a healer in Anglo-Saxon England, he might well receive a spell written down on a scrap of parchment, to be bound like a poultice over the afflicted part. For many purposes, spoken word possessed greater powers than the written. A name, once pronounced, evoked its owner. Anyone foolhardy enough to utter the name of a person deceased could expect to be visited by his or her spirit. Gods, too, could be summoned by the utterance of a name, and since God was likely to be angered if invoked for trivial causes, many people kept the names of the beings they worshipped a hallowed secret. Curses and blessings likewise harnessed the power of the spoken word. As a curse was uttered, it released supernatural powers against those named. A blessing channeled the deity's beneficence. But most spells had to be spoken aloud to be effective. English rustics addressed a verse to swarming bees to discourage them from leaving home. And throughout medieval Europe, repetition of the Lord's Prayer was a trusted cure for warts. Some spells had to be chanted. Others, such as Irakur's invocation of the troll's victims, were to be murmured in a low voice so the formulas could not be overheard. In most spells, furthermore, the words had to be spoken in precisely the right rhythm and tone. It profited a scholar little to know the secret words of power if, when he uttered them, he could not make the correct sounds to conjure their meanings out of the air. If a wizard who wanted to fly as fast as the speediest hawk followed to the letter the instructions given in his handbook of magic, if he boiled snow and oil together on a fire, 2 kinds of wood, ripened it in a sheep's bladder for a moon and a half, mingled it with charcoal, and then powdered the charcoal and placed a pinch of the powder between the pages of a book, took the book in his hand and concentrated the whole of his attention on his destination, what good was all this if he didn't know how to pronounce the essential words? S-I-S-P-I, S-I-S-P-I, Sispi, that the spell prescribed? If that seemed simple enough, and he did indeed find himself far away, could he be sure that when he read off the returning charm, I-T-T-S-S, I-T-T-S-S, Yeats, he would hit on the right sound and not sentence himself to permanent exile? Words indeed were powerful, even perilous. The common currency of human relations they might be, but they were also keys that fit an infinity of hidden locks, opening the doors of the occult wisdom. The more an initiate knew of their potential, the more circumspect he or she became. Storytellers recounting wonders might wax loquacious, but a wizard working wonders kept silent lest his secrets fall into unworthy hands, and all hell break loose in consequence.